In today's episode, we're going to be making a loaf of bread using plain flour and in the slow cooker. So it is so super simple, but because it's so super simple, there are a lot of tips and tricks for me to share along the way so that you're able to make a successful loaf of bread. For that reason, this could be a longer video, but I'm going to put some timestamps. So if there's a tip that you're like, okay, I didn't quite get that, you're able to easily go back and watch that one section. And if you might be getting a little bit bored because you're like, I know that one, then you can skip ahead. With this one, I had a lot of failed loaves of bread as I was learning how to make it. But now, every time I make it, they turn out the same and it is amazing. I'll uncover it so we can see the dough. But between mixing the flour and this stage is approximately 16 hours. So because it's used the slow rise method, once I cook a loaf of bread, I've only ever had one loaf of bread that I've made that grew some mold. It took a week. Out on the bench, yes, I store it in a Dutch oven personally. That's just because I haven't got around to maybe buying something to store the bread in, and I usually cook it in the Dutch oven in an oven. But because the Dutch oven is quite heavy, I thought I would show you a method that is a lot lighter, a lot simpler, so that if you've got your injuries and like at one stage, I couldn't handle the weight of a Dutch oven. So if you're at that same stage, this is a way that this bread is accessible for you to be able to make it. So exciting. With this dough, one thing that's really frustrating is because it uses yeast to rise. Yeast is a single cell microorganism. So that means that it grows and reacts differently in different environments, different times of the year, just at different stages. So, and depending on how old or how new your yeast is as well. So that is why with this bread, there's no hard and fast rules about the timing. The hard and fast rules are about the feel of the bread. And I know you're on the other side of the camera, you're like, Valeriosa, I can't feel the bread. So how is this going to work? Well, that's part of why the video is going to be a little bit long, because I'm going to actually have to explain, show and point out what it is that you're looking for, so that when you've got a loaf of bread in front of you, when you're physically feeling it, you're actually able to go, oh, that's what she meant, okay. So let's get into it. Now, if you've made it this far in this timestamp, I'm going to, do a bit of a disclosure. I have had a lot of fun trying to record this video. I have done everything wrong with the sound that you could possibly imagine, which has been a fantastic learning experience. I now know what not to do. So I didn't create problems, I created opportunities for solutions. So every other part of this video is going to be the same dough, but I've obviously had to remake the dough. And I know for me, when I'm watching videos and it might be two different doughs, I'm always in the back of my mind just a little bit on edge going, will it be different? Like, has a step been missed that could something be different in it? So that's why in every other section of this video, it is going to be the same dough. I'm just going to use this dough here to explain what it is that I'm looking for to tell me to do the next step. But right now, we're going to cut to equivalent to 16 hours ago, where I mixed the flour. To make the dough for this artisan loaf of bread, first we add 700 grams of plain flour, 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. Next, 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Tip: put the salt on the opposite side of the bowl to the yeast, as yeast is a microorganism and salt deactivates yeast.
Mix the yeast in, mix the salt in, and then mix it all through the whole flour. Now we're going to add 450 grams of just above lukewarm water. What that means, put your finger in the water, and if it's about the temperature of your finger, that's correct. Put the water into the flour. Add 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Mix all the ingredients until it forms a ball. If you use your hand, it's gonna get a little sticky. Tip: the amount of flour or water you may need can change based on the weather and where you live. So you know you've got the right amount when it all comes together as a ball. It doesn't matter if it's sticky or dry. For me, the bread always comes out the same. It just has to all come together as a ball. Next, put some cling wrap over the bowl to make it airtight, as the dough does not like air. Tip: is your bench cold like mine? If so, put something that is a neutral temperature under the bowl, because the yeast does not like a cold bench. Place a clean tea towel over the bowl to put the dough in its bed for approximately the next 16 hours.
Okay, so it's approximately 16 hours after when we've mixed that flour up. And I'm just going to show you what the dough looks like. So if you have a look on the side of the bowl, might come around to the other section. So we're a lot closer now. So if you have a look at this bowl, can you see all those bubbles? Those bubbles is what's going to create those little air pockets in the bread to make it a little bit lighter and fluffier. So this means that the dough's been doing what it should do. Now have a look at the top. If I've overproofed it, there's usually a sunk in. So if we have a look over there, can you see how there's a bit of a sunk in? Sorry, really trying to get the camera. There's the camera angle. Okay, do you see over here how there's a little bit of a sunken in section? When I have that in the middle, that's because I've slightly overproofed it. Totally fine. Doesn't matter if you've slightly overproofed it. Usually I have, but if the dough is like a nice little bubble, there's a little bit of you can see I've lost the tension there. So when the dough is at the perfect stage, there'll be a little bit of tension there, there'll be some dough, and it'll be approximately 16 hours after you've mixed it up. But at this stage where it's still looking double the size of when I mixed it, this is perfect for the next stage.
To start off with, I'm going to carefully pull off the cling wrap because I want to use the same cling wrap at the end of this section. With some nice clean hands, I'm going to go in and pulling the dough off the sides of the bowl until I go the whole way around the bowl. What I'm doing here is picking up the dough and folding it over. And I'm doing this about 4 times. So I'm not kneading the dough, just folding it over. Not sure if you can see through the camera, it's getting harder to do this. The reason is because the bread is strengthening. This is what we want. This is what will make a nice loaf of bread. The other part is, because I'm going to be putting this dough into this pan, I know that this amount of dough is slightly too much for this pan. So I'm going to be pulling off 200 grams. So here I have a plate with some cling wrap on it because we know that the dough really doesn't like the air. I'm also adding a tiny bit of plain flour. There's nothing special about this plain flour. The point of using plain flour is just so it doesn't stick. Whoa, now that's a lot of plain flour that I pulled out. So I'm going to be using some of that in the tin because I personally don't like the taste of plain flour on the base of my cooked bread. So I only put a tiny amount in the tin. But hey, that's personal preference. If you're finding the dough too sticky, add more flour. So I'm just pulling 200 grams of dough. just ripping it out. You can see it's sticking to my hand. So I need a little more flour in my hand. And all I'm trying to do here is shape the dough into a bowl. Put a little tension on the top. And now I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to use this in the next video to show you some of the other things you can make with the same dough. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this dough, just trying to shape it into a ball, pulling the dough at the top to put some tension into it and bringing it around to a seam at the bottom of the loaf. Once shaped, put it in the pan. Now, because I like my bread having sesame seeds over the top, I'm going to add the sesame seeds at this stage. I do this by pouring the sesame seeds over the top of the bread and lightly pushing them in. I don't want to push too hard because the air pockets are going to give me a lovely bread texture, but if I don't push them into the bread, they just fall off. I'm not too worried about lightly pressing the seeds into the dough, as the dough still has the second 2-hour rise before it is cooked. Now making this as airtight as possible, and put the clean tea towel back over the top. Now we let this sit here for 2 hours to do a second rise. Oh, I tried many times to skip this step, but every time I skipped the second rise, I ended up with a gummy loaf of bread. So I learnt the hard way that you can't skip the second rise.
Now that I've done the fold over technique, if I don't have the time to let this do the second rise for the 1.5 to 2 hours before cooking it off, I would put this into the fridge. It can go in the fridge for about 3 to 5 days. Then when I'm ready to cook it, I need to pull it out of the fridge and let it slowly rise back to room temperature before cooking it off in either the oven or the slow cooker. If I was to cook it on the stove top after that, really should let it return to room temperature, but I don't. And here we are back. It's been an 1.5 hours or so. I lost a bit track of time. Can you see how it's actually risen? It's spread out amongst all of it. So all we're going to do now, take all the covers off. Take the lid off the slow cooker. Put this in the slow cooker. And turn on to high. And we're going to leave it on high for 2.5 hours. Okay, the slow cooker's been on for 2.5 hours. We're just going to test the temperature. Whew, look at that steam. Put that in. And as you can tell, we're not going to put it the whole way down, because if we do, we're testing the temperature of the element, not the bread. Now, the game changer for me was when I found out that bread is cooked between 190 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That looks like it's at about the 190. So as you can see right here, the bread is cooked. It's been in here for 2.5 hours. So it is done. You can pull it out, eat it, and it is, well, let it cool down first. But because we like the crispy top, we're actually going to pull it out of here and put it in an oven. So here we have our bread that is perfectly cooked at the 190 degrees Fahrenheit. I only know it's Fahrenheit because it's a big number, but because I am a fan of the crispy shell on a bread, I'm just going to chuck it in the mini toaster oven. And the place is smelling amazing. This bread is looking so good. Let's just have a look. Oh, it's been in the oven for about 15 minutes on 220. And there we have a beautiful loaf of bread made. The bread's had a little bit of time to cool, so let's cut into it and check it out. Hear that crunch. Look at that bread. A beautifully cooked artisan loaf.